As we go further, we get to meet Bernard, but not just anywhere, but in a farm type scenario. And look at this interesting ship-like object. This apparently has some kind of nozzle that sprays something, almost reminiscent of those weird pesticide cars that China had rolling on the streets during the pandemic. And you see the factories on the background kind of symbolically representing pollution in the midst of this kind of environment where Bernard kind of helps a deer, also symbolic of not only self-sustainability but the connection of man and nature. Here is that machine again, putting its little tube out. Who knows what it's gonna spray? Is it, I don't know. It's very strange. So right after that scene, we go to Bernard's workplace. And what is it that Bernard does here? He, I shit you not, is a butcher. Now, wait a second. You telling me this episode starts with a gas mask? You telling me you got all kinds of scenes about the stock market freezing? And the job of the main protagonist of this episode ends up being a butcher? But not just protagonist, but these two dudes who end up being the antagonist of the episode. So when you think about the Huanan seafood market and how the pandemic started in the Huanan seafood market, and then you have a Westworld episode where the main antagonists just happen to be butchers, you have to wonder, is there something deeper to this? Especially after I showed you that all-seeing eye. And there have been multiple moments where it's very obvious that this isn't just some random coincidence. They wanted you to see that eye. They wanted you to see that golden ratio of pattern. They wanted you to think about disease, and they wanted you to think about the idea of butchering animals. So right after that, we go to elevated scrutiny. We have that weird graphic type of thing that shows all kinds of dots all over the place. Very organic looking, almost like a disease. And it says here simply elevated scrutiny in London. And then we get to meet Sir Eric Trump. Yes, this is the son who takes over his father's business. Very, very rich kid. Meets his socialite friends. And let me just go ahead and reiterate what this particular rich dude is saying over here. None of this is real. So in this kind of like drunk conversation, he's talking about the nature of reality. And right over here, he goes on to explain, if they put a simulation inside a simulation, that's a massive fuck you. Really interesting line, because not only is he taking this existentialistic approach, kind of a Matrix-like approach of do we live in a Matrix or do we live in a simulation, he's also literally giving the line that Michael Moore said, this would be a big FU if Trump was essentially elected. And in talking about reality upon a reality, I believe that he's kind of hinting that there is this kind of deep state reality, this kind of like propaganda mirror type reality, not too different from that first scene where you saw that Trumpian character dying because he had this mirage and kind of went through the mirage. Well, this character seems to be evoking similar themes. World that is wrapped around you that could just be an illusion. I do take this in a very deep way, almost like an MK Ultra type way. And I'll get back to that because there are more motifs of this kind of idea of perception, the eye, the all-seeing eye, and even of brainwashing of MK Ultra. Once again, we got another character. The main character right here is interviewing for a job. As you can see in the background, we have some dude protect himself from a potential disease. I'm telling you, these sets, nothing is a coincidence. I've been to these sets before. These guys have everything scripted to the point. All the outfits for every extra that you see in there is scripted to the point. So this is not just a random coincidence. This is not just some random costume designers. Oh, let's just put this here or put that there. There was a direction to put this mask here in the scene where the main protagonist is essentially asking for a job. From this particular screen capture, you can tell that he was military, and there seemed to have been some kind of event that happened, either possibly a pandemic outbreak, possibly some kind of civil war. And so the very next scene shows him with his psychologist, and I'm gonna just go ahead and quote what the psychologist says because it's kind of important here. He says, maybe the program is bullshit. You're a smart guy. And essentially what the psychologist is trying to do is get the protagonist to see that his past traumas and whatever programming was in association with his past traumas related to his friend's death, that he can break this programming. That he has the ability, but he has to kind of dive in. He has to really reach deep to break away from whatever it is that is troubling him so much. It's a very important scene because once again it resonates with the idea of MK Ultra, of programming, of a simulated reality in front of you, meaning everything is perceived to be a certain way, but it's not really what it is. So after a psychologist, the man decides to make some money again. And this scene is really, really creepy because think about this. We just saw him go to a psychologist, then he goes to make some money. Where does he go next? Where does he go next? Well, he goes to some weird rave-like party. Look at this. I mean, this looks... Look, they're wearing... Are you kidding me? I can't tell if they're wearing gloves or if their hands are just dead. I think they're dead. I think these people are dead. But to me, it's very indicative of that disease theme. You got these people with their heads wrapped. They look obviously like they're dead. And in this particular scene, I mean, guys, this is going to trip you out. Look, they're taking the implants again. Watch what happens here. He walks into the party, and there's some naked dude tripping out on this screen. I kid you not, guys. This is actually real for all of those really into the idea of, let's say the all-seeing eye. I don't want to say the ILL word because I know they're gonna demonetize this damn videos, those damn algorithms, now that the algorithms are in charge. Guys, look at this. This to the right is Stanley Kubrick. Now, if you didn't know, Stanley Kubrick was also responsible for Eyes Wide Shut and ended up dying prior to that movie coming out. So Stanley Kubrick had also done another movie called Clockwork Orange, where he stuck this kind of weird MK Ultra type scene. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this scene it's a mirror version of what Stanley Kubrick was trying to do with Clockwork Orange. So consider this your MK Ultra scene. It's very, very disturbing, very, very creepy. I don't think there's much else to say about this. This woman just kind of admits that he ended up just taking too much drugs, which once again is symbolic of the concept that the CIA had drugged up unsuspecting participants, scientists, with LSD. Some of them ended up killing themselves, and this character ends up getting put in a situation where he is, let's say, possibly not surviving. Let's just put it that way. You know, he gets kind of hit pretty hard by this dude, and you never know. So then, as all this MK Ultra craziness is happening, the main character goes on, and I quote, he says, "I think about what you told me once when we're being medevaced out. You said they built the world to be a game, and they rigged it so that they made sure that they always won." So now you know why I gave you that initial scene with Biden in dementia, because now in this MK Ultra type moment, he's dunking down, reflecting on his friend who had passed away, and essentially reflecting the concept that him and his friend, when they're being evacuated from some kind of, whether it was a disease pandemic or some kind of civil war, whatever had happened, he was being evacuated, and in this kind of moment of life and death, he started having this reflection: the entire world was rigged. So it was in the moment of almost death that he realizes there's no chance of winning. It's so very weird, man, when you think about what's happening with our modern politics, or what's happening with the elections right now. This scene is where you got Trump Jr. essentially going with our artificial intelligence character, robot. And I want to show you this because these buildings, they kind of evoke the sense that there is a different type of world where people are relying on kind of city gardening to get some of their food, of their supplies. So once again, it's indicative of a post-pandemic world where the food supply chain, it doesn't seem to be the same. It seems like everything is kind of locally grown in this type of future utopian world. Here's more shots, and you can see all the trees, all the little gardens. And as we go into one of these buildings, check out this shot. Once again, we have the eye. It's kind of like an all-seeing eye motif with these kind of golden ratio type spirals going all around each other. Very, how do you say? Well, it's not coincidental because this is like the third time they already did it, so. And then the Trump Jr. character, or Eric Trump character, meets with our artificial intelligence character. Look at this. This literally looks like a meeting in Trump Tower or something. They start discussing this database that the father had created, which tracks every single human being in the world, which is essentially his father's legacy. It's kind of a unifying artificial intelligence that runs most of the world's needs. At least that's what I've gotten so far from this episode. And if you weren't convinced that this guy is kind of like Eric Trump, let me go ahead and give you the line that he says in reference to his father's work with his artificial intelligence. He says, "My father cared more about this thing than me. When I grew up, I realized it wasn't even close." I don't know. I don't think I need to elaborate on that one. I think you kind of got it. Going further, this is another shot of the kind of self-sustainable atmosphere that you got in this future utopian. This is an interesting meeting because right after that, you have a meeting with the little Trump Jr. character and somebody who has Asian heritage. I can't say exactly where she's from, but could she represent China? Perhaps. Very interesting that in the end, as they're having the meeting and kind of like a standoff between each other, she says something very, very interesting when it comes to the modern geopolitics and the relationships between America and China. She says, "It'd be an inconvenience to kill you, but we would have your daddy's system to help us strategize how to deal with it." Now, his father died in the beginning from a mirage, if you remember, going into a pool, and then it zooms out into this all-seeing eye. And then you have this weird scene where the son is confronting an Asian, dare I say possibly Chinese character, who threatens his life, saying that she can cover it all up with his daddy's system, essentially. Once again, I don't think I have to add anything to this particular moment. I think you kind of got it. We go with Bernard back into the the butcher shop. And here is, I told you that these butchers are antagonists because they have their fight over here. And then Bernard goes kind of crazy and does a classic UFC headlock on the dude. And yeah, the dude's out. Protagonist just gets a phone call from, remember how we showed you that job interview where there was that guy with a mask with the disease? Well, here he gets a phone call and it's essentially saying that he did not get the job that he wanted. And why I thought this scene was kind of cool is because right here, he, in a very symbolic way, he asks the interviewer who called him, you assume it's an interviewer, "Hey, no offense, but are you human?" So he's not only questioning this kind of human artificial intelligence relationship, but once again, thematically, it hits towards this, what am I living? What is this reality? Are you human? Are you artificial? Is this even real? Is there a mirage in front of me? So this is kind of like a really important moment. It's kind of him, after he doesn't get his job interview, he starts kind of reflecting on his military past with his friend. And I would say this is the moment that he kind of gets deprogrammed. And he says here, "I think about what you told me once when we were being medevaced. You said that this system doesn't care about us at all." He goes on, "And you're right, but you never had to figure out how to live in this world because you never made it back. And I wish you were here, but you're not. You're not real." So that's the moment that he kind of breaks away and just realizes that, no more illusions, no more hiding, no more relying and being dependent on this artificial intelligence robot that's literally kind of taking the personality of his friend and just it's kind of like this awful mirage of his friend, just like this dead ghost version of his friend being trapped in a robot. And that's this moment of kind of breaking away from that. And then we go to our last scene. And guys, hold on to your chairs because when I show you this, I swear to God, you will be falling off your chairs. You are not going to believe what I'm about to show you. Bernard meets a guy at a fish port. I mean, are you seeing this? A freaking fish port, guys. I kid you not. Now, there are multiple things to consider about this particular screen capture. One of them, you got, of course, the symbolism to the sea market, the Huanan sea market where the outbreak started. Secondly, Bernard is coming here to ask these fishermen to essentially take him to an island called Westworld. So this is the moment where, incoming from this Huanan Sea Market type location, he's then being taken to one of the illusion worlds. So essentially these fishermen become the bridge between reality and the simulated Truman Show type world. And also what you need to consider here is not, are we just talking about fish port, something that is analogous to the Huanan fish market, but we're talking about the Palawan Island. Now, this has very interesting significance because Palawan is technically Filipino. But if you read here, it says here 10 reasons Philippines shouldn't let China take over Palawan. So it seems as if China is after the takeover of that island. Once again, going with that theme of China takeover. I don't, to me, this is unbelievable. From the all-seeing eye to the all-seeing eye to the respirators to the fish port to the butchers and now the Palawan Island that's possibly being taken over by China. And I should add a footnote that I only found that out after I already made the analogy of the main protagonist, Dorothy. It was only after I had analogized her to China that I didn't figure out that Palawan Island is an island that is in danger of being taken over by China. Once again, hitting that motif of a silent takeover. It says, what are you looking out there? And this is the very end where he says, Westworld. And there they go. So, wow. How to start this? Okay, I guess I'll say this. I'm not the one to make these type of episodes, right? I mean, I always find it fascinating when they put symbols throughout the world, but when I saw this episode, it can't be coincidental. The sheer amount of specificity with the symbolisms seems like whatever it is that we're experiencing right now, there seems to be some kind of crazy, let's call it a veil of illusion that is occurring with the stock market, with all the pandemic motifs, with the butcher shop, the Huanan Sea Market being scapegoated for what could be a quote-unquote weapon. And I thought I was going crazy when I made this episode, but then on a day's notice, I noticed that Pockets of the Future had come out with an episode about a Tom Hanks movie called The Terminal. I actually do remember watching this. The Terminal is about a guy from a country that had essentially gone through some kind of civil war, had changed governments, so that his passport had essentially become defunct while he was traveling. He came in and had no citizenship anywhere, had essentially no place to go. And what's the first screen capture that this Pockets of the Future, Paul Romano, decided to introduce in talking about this movie? This one, guys. I kid you not. You're talking about a movie about Tom Hanks being stuck in the terminal because there's a travel ban and you got these people with masks. And I thought it was really strange that Tom Hanks happened to get coronavirus. But consider this, he got coronavirus in Australia when the case totals was only up to 300. So if Australia has 25.5 million people and Tom Hanks was one of the first 300, his chances of getting the virus that early on was 1 in 83,000, almost 1 in 100,000. So now you see why I'm making this episode. It's not so much because my own connections are all 100% tight locked. You know, some of those connections could be random noise. But upon seeing that there is another YouTube channel that thematically had made a similar episode about how on a different project starting Tom Hanks had essentially created scenes that seemed to have projected the pandemic, I thought this is something worth mentioning and just showing the audience, and maybe the people, you know, maybe you guys have a better idea of what all of this means. So please leave your thoughts and comments below, and of course, please take care of yourselves. You know, I started rationing personally. I just started rationing, so I have a certain amount. I have like 2 or 3 weeks of food in my house or whatever. But I said, you know what? I'm going to drop my diet by almost, I think it was like, I dropped it by almost like 40% of my diet. So I'm eating 60% of the food, just kind of rationing, getting my body used to eating just little bits, because I don't know what's going to happen 3 weeks from now. I don't know what's going to happen a month from now. Is there going to be other aggravating effects that would even put us in a deeper hole outside of just the pandemic itself? So I guess that only time will tell. So thank you for following me. I will continue to bring more episodes throughout this pandemic. So definitely tell your friends and your family members and the ones who you think would appreciate this information. Yeah, just tell them about the show. Go ahead and share it. I got plenty of time to come out with more episodes in the next 3 months. Thank you so much for following me. This is Felipe Osorio, signing out.